Welcome, welcome everyone. Happy Thursday. We're about to get started in a few minutes. Thanks for all for being on time.
Welcome all. It's wonderful to see you here today. We are expecting more people to join us, but we want to start to respect everyone's time. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lucette Jaimes with CoCreative, and I will be hosting our webinar today. I want to just let you all know that we are recording this session, so you will have access to this recording if you want to, and also want to share with others. Just to share a little bit with you about CoCreative, I'll share my slide. CoCreative works with people who don't know each other and sometimes don't even like each other to solve complex problems, do systems change, and ultimately create new futures together. We support collaborative efforts in different sectors and communities, ranging from, working with health, economic development, energy, food, education, and many other sectors. And we do so we can also create more equitable and ecologically sustainable systems. We do this through supporting and cultivating networks and collaborative innovation, as well as training and supporting system leaders. So why we're here? Well, first of all, in CoCreative, we have the gift of having so many partners and working with so many amazing people who have powerful frameworks and wisdom and experiences that really helps advance our cultural evolution, as well as our work in systems transformation and creating a world where everyone thrives. And so for us, it's really important to create a space where all of us in the community can come together to learn and to access these different frameworks, experiences, wisdom, insights. And particularly today, we want to learn together the importance of building mutual cultural understanding in connecting deeply with your stakeholders and our stakeholders as well, and reflect on how your identity, values, and beliefs impact how you show up in your professional life. And lastly, explore a performance framework to help us engage with others in new and powerful ways. I'm super excited to introduce you to our speaker today, Andres Marquez Lara, founder and CEO of You Facilitate. This is a leadership development and facilitation training company, and they help groups align toward joyful and powerful action. They help them taste the possibility of a new future. Andres has personally designed and facilitated hundreds of events of thousands for thousands of participants. And the methodology that he has developed is dynamic, inclusive, and it has a lot of different approaches from design thinking, improv theater, and systems thinking. Welcome, Andres. I'm really looking forward to having this journey with you. And for today, what we can expect is, of course, I already said the context, and then we're going to enter into understanding collective wellness and embracing diversity, what we meant with that when we created the webinar. We then will go into the application of it. How is it that we can create our own cultures? And then we'll have a delicious time on learning through improv games with leaders. And then we'll go into a more reflection and integration of the insights together, and we'll have a short closing. Of course, if you have any questions, please connect with Melissa Darnell here in terms of any technical issues that you may have. And I'm happy to just then start here. And I'll just first share a little framework, and actually important frameworks, a little but very important one that we use in CoCreative to the extent that we support our collaborations and our leaders, particularly in developing our capacity to collaborate. And it has 4 elements. This is really a framework that we call, it's a framework that helps us with awareness-based leadership. And it starts, of course, with developing awareness and the importance of that to help us really access multiple levels of insight about what's happening to ourselves, to others, and of course, to the systems that we're working with. In addition to awareness, we really pay a lot of attention and work on developing the capacity, our capacity and our stakeholders' capacity to clarifying our intentions. So once we start deepening our awareness about the situations, ourselves, others, and what the situations are calling from ourselves, we have better clarity as to what our intentions are. So we can be in congruence and integrity to the place where we want to move towards in ourselves, in others, in the systems work that we are creating. And of course, together with intention come choices. And so life will come to us at different times with complex times and complex change systems that we are all working on. And what we really want to invite people to develop capacity for is to identify the moment when you have a choice point and be able to take a moment and then choose how you want to react rather than react to whatever is happening in the face of life. And that really helps us because then it allows us to not just react out of habit, bias, or actually fear that sometimes make us create systems and changes that reflect those biases and those fears and those habits. And lastly, courage. So we know that courage is very needed to really help us take the leap and move towards the change we want to see, to enable others to have that change as well. And when we show up courageously, others are also able to show courageously. And so for us, this framework is really, really important and useful. We use it in all our collaborations when we design our workshops, our trainings, our network meetings. And a big question that we had is, how do you actually develop awareness, intention, choice, and courage? And so what it'll be great to hear today is Andres sharing his framework, different methodologies that actually help us develop all of these different elements and increase our capacity to be better collaborative leaders. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Andres to tell us a story and keep us moving. Welcome, Andres. Over to you.
Thank you, Luz. And thank you again, everyone, for being here on this Thursday morning, early morning for some of you in the West Coast, and maybe evenings or afternoons, depending where you're in the world. And I love that story, Lou. And we really kind of built this webinar in true co-creative fashion. Melissa, Russ, and I got a chance to meet in advance, and as we're kind of, riffing and playing with each other, thinking, how do we kind of make this work? We have these different components. This framework we felt really kind of helped land the plane for us, where, because a lot of things we're going to be talking about today, and what I'm hoping to offer as an invitation is the power of performance, the power of improv to help us lead ourselves and grow, and in particular, how to engage with others so we can go, leverage diversity, navigate diversity towards collective wellness and well-being. As we'll hopefully see by the end of today's webinar, when you are on the stage, when you're performing, you actually are increasing and strengthening your awareness of where you are on the stage, your motivations as an actor or what you're doing, right? You're developing and clarifying your intention in that moment. You're increasing your range of choices. And of course, you're building courage to be able to take and make offers for your ensemble to be able to build on that. So we felt this is a really good starting point and a yes and to the co-creative framework that they have, right? So we're here today again to talk about how do we achieve this? How do we leverage diversity? How do we navigate this beautiful thing that we have in the world to achieve collective wellness and well-being, something that we all really need and strive for? And, my first starting point was, to achieve collective wellness requires, we must embrace diversity. There's no going around it. Think in nature, think of all complex ecosystems. The more diverse they are, the more resilient they are. These coral reefs that we have around the world, the ones that are able to sustain some of the climate change that are happening, some of the spills, is because they're more diverse. You know, in complexity, diversity equals resilience. And so to achieve collective wellness and well-being, we must embrace diversity. Now, before we continue, I want to take a little detour to just really clarify that, you know, we're going to be talking about wellness and well-being. I want to clarify the two because I'm very going to soon transition to using the term collective well-being. So wellness has to do with the state or quality of being healthy, focus on health, right? Whereas well-being goes beyond health. I could do it around happiness, other types of well-being. So we're going to talk about well-being because we feel it's broader. And a lot of things that we're talking about in that spectrum can also fall under wellness. So from that perspective, I wanted to invite and bring in this framework that actually I learned from CoCreative called the Well-Being Blueprint. That is this wonderful framework that they talk about how do we achieve well-being, collective well-being. And they have these 6 principles. Again, I highly recommend that you check them out. And these 6 principles is their blueprints on how we as a society could achieve collective well-being. And I thought this was very interesting because the very first one basically starts with what matters to people, right? And, you know, well-being. And they have this beautiful definition that says that people need to be connected to others and to be helpful. We all need to feel that we belong, they're safe. We need to experience some predictability in life, that we have influence of what's happening around us, to be able to experience purpose and growth. We need to be able to hold on to build on what matters to us. And a combination and balance of these things is what they call well-being. Beautiful. But I want to bring your attention to the part in bold, because I believe like this is why diversity is so challenging when it comes to other well-being, right? Because people need to be connected to others. That alone right there is the big challenge that we have to face. Charles Taylor, a Canadian philosopher, says that the great challenge of this century, both for politics and social science, is the understanding of the other. And I don't need to go too far because, you know, if you just turn on the news, you turn on social media, you see this polarization all over the world, right? You know, whether it's in India, in the US, in Venezuela, in the UK, you have these polarizations happening at the political level, but also the social level, right? And I think part of it is because in many ways, we are hardwired to very easily create an us versus them. This other becomes this projection where we can just put onto them things that we don't like about ourselves, right? But we're hardwired to do that. Think of our ancestors thousands of years ago. They had to very quickly decide, is this person a friend or a foe, right? They had to make these quick decisions, and that actually is part of how we're hardwired. Our reptilian brain, our lizard brain, makes these split-second decisions, whether I like you or not, based on what you're wearing, what you're not wearing, what colors you have, etc. And oftentimes this happens in an instant, and we're not aware of it, right? Thus, going back to the idea of raising awareness, so we can kind of be aware of these reactions. So this is something that happens to us biologically. We're making these quick decisions, and we're quickly deciding, you know, you're a friend or a foe. So the other, whenever we encounter another that may look different than us, they may have different cultures, different ways of speaking, we're triggering that, okay, fight or flight. Is this person a friend or is this person a foe, right? On top of that, add that we have culture, and culture essentially reinforces this narrative of, you know, who are the good people and who are the bad people, depending on which culture you are. And what it does, it's in Twitter and social media, you create these what do you call them in Spanish? I forgot the Spanish name too, but basically these like cacophony of sounds, like what do you call I'm thinking here in Spanish, como una echo chambers. It's a word in English. So they create these echo chambers where, you know, depending on your political view, on your social view, you can go to this Twitter space or Facebook and just hear that. So it's very easy to ignore the other and just stick with the people you know. So we have our biology that's kind of reinforcing this challenging way of engaging with others. We have culture that does too. And culture, you know, it can feel very abstract, but a helpful definition that I heard once, which I really liked, is culture is the way we do things around here, right? The way we do things around here. So I happen to be a Venezuelan American, you know, cisgender, married father of 2 in Raleigh, North Carolina. That's going to give me a particular culture on the way I speak, on the way I dress, on the way I show up, on the way things. If I have been born and you know, raised as an Afro descendant in Colombia, right? My language, my way of speaking, the way we do things in that part of the world and the way I was raised will be different. And so the way we do things around here, I think, can be a helpful indication to define culture. And this is why the other, quote unquote, can be quite challenging, because when we engage other people who do things differently than us, right, they're going to activate the part of our brain that is like, okay, well, what is this? Who is this person? Again, friend or foe? And one way to think about culture as well is, that it's actually, the more we're in it, the more we forget about it. Kenneth Jones and Tim Alkun, who I believe you had a webinar with a few months ago or 6 months ago, have this quote. It says, the longer you swim in a culture, the more invisible it becomes. And so this is part of the beauty and the danger of culture, that we often don't realize that we are actually, wherever we are reinforcing or we're challenging our culture, and we're not always aware of that. Now, culture, again, gives us scripts. The way we're raised, the way we do things around here will give us a script in the way we engage with each other, right? If I am in Latin America and I see Lucette, like, I might greet her with a kiss on the cheek, because the way we do things in Colombia, Venezuela is like we greet somebody we meet and we greet, like, but if I did that in, I don't know, another part of the world, that may not be seen as appropriate, right? Exactly. You get the idea. So it's, again, these are scripts, and sometimes these scripts can be quite powerful. Again, when you are an immigrant living in the US, for example, you meet other people who are from part of the world, that script bonds you. It's like, oh yeah, like arepas or whatever, or mate if you're from Argentina, Uruguay. But our scripts can also tear us apart. If I'm a Trump supporter and you are a Biden supporter, that script's going to kind of keep us away, right? So the thing is, these cultural scripts, again, that we often don't realize are scripts, these are just who we are, part of identity, can often get in the way of us engaging with the other. The culture, the story we have about ourselves, also create a narrative about what is power. It answers for us these 4 questions. Who does what? Who gets what? Who sets the agenda? Who decides what, right? The answer to those questions is going to be very different in Iran than it is in Uganda, than it is in Venezuela, than it is in the US, right? And again, this is something that people just say, well, this is just the way things are. This is just normal. And again, the invitation is that, no, that is actually culture. We are creating a culture, and then we're choosing to reinforce a culture or not. By the way, this comes from a definition from a wonderful book that I highly recommend. Again, and you'll have access to all the slides, but it's called All About Power by a Southeast Asian feminist author, Shrulata Batiwala. And I just really have found her work to be very helpful in explaining power. Again, power and culture can feel so abstract at times that I love this definition because it makes it so tangible. Who has power? Well, the person, who sets the agenda? Who gets what? Who decides what? And these are the kind of questions that can really help us visualize the power in the room. And again, our culture will let us know who determines that. And again, as I was saying, culture is this thing where, there's a quote from Churchill. It says, we shape our buildings, and then afterwards our buildings shape us, right? We create a culture, we forgot we created it because it gets passed down to us, and then we just kind of end up being shaped by it. Many years ago, I started writing a book that was all about how workshops and facilitation was a type of ritual for the modern day. And in the process, I learned that I came across this book by Tom F. Driver that said essentially, that we are born Homo sapiens, that we become humans through rituals. And he made the point that rituals, in many ways, are akin to the cultural DNA. So while our biological bodies, get the DNA from our parents, and we're born into this world as a Homo sapien, our cultural DNA actually gets embedded and transmitted through rituals. And so in many ways, it's a very powerful transmission of who we are as a species. But the thing is, we forget that culture gets created by someone at some point in some form in time. And so when we're engaging the other, all this messiness is in the background. So how can we achieve collective well-being? How can we achieve any state of collective state as a group of 8 billion people when you have all these things happening, where you have our lizard brains going off and being afraid of fight or flight, when we have media that's reinforcing these narratives and polarizing, where we forget that we are actually part of a culture that sometimes is creating these schisms. So it can be quite challenging and overwhelming. So for us, again, the idea is how do we then break from this, we need the other to achieve collective well-being, but we have these things that get in the way of engaging with the other and really kind of understanding their point of view and bringing that process to be something that can be collective. So what can help with that is basically to understand the other is the power of improv. Now, hopefully you had a chance to see the TED Talk that was sent out earlier in preparation for this by Dr. Lois Holtzman. So Lois Holtzman is a mentor and a friend. I'm an associate at the Eastside Institute, where she helped co-found with Fred Newman back many years ago. And they are advocates for this way of looking at life that is not new. I mean, it's been said before that life's a performance, right? But the way they talk about it, I think, is quite powerful. And so in that talk, she gives 3 examples of how performance helped 2 different types of groups, really kind of come together and understand each other. She talked about, the situation with the cops and kids in New York City. She used examples of how the improv games they played allowed them to really connect and understand. And I wanted to just capture 2 quotes from that talk that I think really speak to the heart of this, because when we are playing or doing improv is a form of play, we relate to who we are and who we're becoming at the very same time. The thing about performance is that, again, in the same moment, we're forced to acknowledge and increase awareness of what are our scripts and what are the scripts that I'm creating to be able to play with the other person, right? And that allows us to go beyond ourselves. It allows us to go beyond our identity. Essentially, when you're doing improv, when you're on the stage, it becomes this kind of social emotional gym where you can develop the muscles to practice what it might be like to go beyond that comfort zone, to try on different scripts. As a man, I can play to be a woman. As a woman, I can play to be a man. I can try on different scripts, and it doesn't mean that I'm gonna instantly gain empathy. No, it doesn't work that way, right? But I open myself up to an experience, and I guess it's like an opening to see what can I discover that. For me personally, improv saved my life. I was 15 years old. I was in Mrs. Robbins' drama class as a teen in Columbus, Ohio. I had just moved from Boston to Columbus, and I had just been randomly assigned to a drama class. And part of my life performance was that I had to be the intelligent, kind gentleman, the scholar athlete, and nothing bad about that life performance. However, it also very oppressive, because as a teen, any impulse I had around, wanting to be with girls, wanting to be angry, being the asshole, there was no space in my life for that to come out. And here I am in Ms. Rama's drama class, and I play a game called freeze tag. You may have played it before at some point, where you have 2 people start a scene, and then the people outside, one of them says freeze, they tap the other person out, they come in, and whatever they say, you have to say yes and. So I found myself tapping people out, coming in, and making these offers that I was a murderer. I was killing this. I was the Casanova. I was doing these things that in my real life I wasn't allowed to be or do, but on the stage I wanted to try it out just for fun. And what was beautiful was that the people had to play with me. I didn't get rejected by that, because part of the game was they had to build with that. Something happened to me when I was 15 when I did those games, because I felt like for the first time my soul could breathe. Someone had witnessed a part of me that I rejected, that I wasn't allowed to, a part of a script that I wasn't allowed to have. And they let me play with that script and told me, it's okay, in this context, play it. You're still here. We still care about you. And that set me on the path, 25 years ago, to do what I do today. So I'm a huge fan of improv, not just at the theoretical level, but at the kind of healing level. Because again, that was my experience. And again, I feel that one of the most powerful ways to engage with the otherness that, as we just saw, gets in the way of achieving collective well-being and connecting with other people is performance. So I know that was a lot. I put this slide in here to remind to slow down, but also just for us to take a collective breath before we move on to what's next. So at this point, you may have questions, which I understand, and you may be processing a lot of information, right? And I'm going to ask you to just sit with that for a little while. Let it feel that in your body, because what I want to do is I want to see how does it show up when you begin to we're actually going to play a little bit. So in advance, I want to kind of apologize a little bit to my introverted friends, those of you who perhaps identify as introverts, who perhaps don't like to be on the main stage. We're going to try to do a little warm up to get you there, but we are going to invite people to play an activity, a game, right? So here is basically how this game is going to work. In a moment, Melissa, who's been very helpful with the chat, is going to assign you to one of 6 groups. Now, these groups have been, they have a value that's been assigned to them. These values came from a polarity that we split up. So if you're familiar with CoCreative, you know they're big into polarity framework and they use it a lot. And I'm a big fan of their work and that framework as well. And so Russ and Melissa helped me identify 3 polarities that we split up to kind of ensure that there'll be some tension in the groups, right? So we had contemplation and action as a polarity that we split up. We have playful and serious as another polarity, and task and relationship. Again, and the idea is that when you're assigned to that group, this is going to be your most important value. This is going to be the value that really anchors the culture of your group and that creates a script of your culture. By the way, a little side note that this activity is me kind of refining and riffing on an activity called the Tribes Exercise by Danielle Shapiro on a book called Negotiating the Non-Negotiable. So I'm kind of taking that and just kind of putting my own spin on it, but just so you have a sense of where it's coming from. So what's going to happen is when you go into your small groups, you're going to have about 7 to 10 minutes to do the following. I want all of you as a group to choose a group animal and kind of find an or an emoji. Find some group animal or emoji that represents your particular core value. If there's a song or quote that comes up for you, find that as well. What is a hand gesture? You know, the serious versus playful might have different hand gestures. So think of a hand gesture you might have as a group. Think about how you conceive of power in your society, in your culture. Who does what? Who gets what? Who sets the agenda? Who decides what? So think about power within the culture you're creating. Change your Zoom name to reflect your group's culture. So, you know, whether it's adding the emoji or adding kind of something, but find something to change your Zoom name so we know that you're part of that culture. If you have time, you know, reflect on a personal real life connection you have to this value. So for example, if I'm in the playful group, I may think about this experience I just shared with you about my improv activities. If I'm the serious group, I may think of, you know, me being very serious and, you know, in my classes perhaps, but I want you to find some personal connection to make this more meaningful. And then most importantly, at the end of your time, before we come back to this large group, I want you to choose a leader, somebody to represent your group when we come back. And I'm going to ask Melissa if you could put those different instructions in the chat as well, so we have that ready. And then before we go, any questions about what you're going to be doing in this small group? Yes, please, Todd.
Yeah, so the groups will be formed around the polarity. So it'll be contemplation action. That's our group. And
one half of it.
One of them. Okay, so there's
if it's it might be just so it'll be 6 groups, and you'll have one group around contemplation, one group around action.
Okay, that's easier. I was like, oh yeah, express the duality. Yeah, okay,
exactly.
Good deal.
Any other questions? Okay. These are smaller groups, which is great. You'll have more time to kind of connect but if you happen to be finished early, just, you know, come back in. But again, you have 7 to 10 minutes as a group to kind of try to identify and really connect with this core value in this group. Okay. All right. Let's see what emerges. See you in about a few minutes. Back to the report. Hey, Pooja.
Hello. I accidentally came back.
Oh, did you want me to put you back in the room?
You not mean
It's
to?
just 2 seconds anymore.
Oh, I don't know if I can since I already closed them. Yeah, it would just be a few
No,
seconds.
Actually, it was my mistake. I went to press enter to mute myself again, and automatically I just jumped back because the timer was there. So it's okay.
Oh,
It
good.
happens. We're so excited that you're here.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, groups. So now I'm eager to hear these 6 different groups. So let's see, we have, who was in the group of contemplation? Let's see, I see inner presence. Okay, and the other person that was part of the contemplation. Okay, Susan, wonderful. And then in action, who do we have in action? Todd, okay.
Sorry.
And Margaret taking action, all part of it, good. And then I think Pooja, were you also in that one? Okay. And who, oh, I see Frolic and Sea Otter, love it. So they're, we have Carrie was also there, and then Tim. And then the serious, with serious Judy, appreciate that. Can't smile though, right? You got a serious, serious Maureen and serious William, awesome. And then Taz, we have Dr. Antoinette, Hera and Jennifer. Thank you, Hera. And then relationship, Jennifer, Mohammed, and Lucette, wonderful. So hopefully you all had a chance to think about these different characteristics and kind of have some inkling of kind of this culture you're creating. And at this point, I'm going to ask for those that were your chosen leaders of this tribe, of this newly formed tribe, to raise your hand on Zoom or physically. And then what's going to happen is Melissa's going to help me spotlight the 6 of you. So thank you. We have 3 here, Sirius, Rachel, Margaret. Need 2 more, let's see. So the relationship group, I think.
Jennifer Johnson.
Okay. Okay, and Jennifer Johnson. So we're going to then put them on the spotlight, Melissa. And we should have 6 people taking up the screen as we go into our next activity. So thank you, leaders, for doing that. I'll walk you through what's going to happen shortly. Okay. So as that's happening, I'm going to also share my screen and explain what is going to happen next. So you've all spent 7 quick minutes building this culture in your groups. You've picked 6 leaders around these different polarities, and you've brought them forward into the spotlight. So thank you all for being here. Now here's the game. You are now on an island, and we're going to see the 6 leaders, how they're going to figure out to divide equitably the resources for your group. There's a hurricane that's coming that threatens to destroy much of their food supply and contaminate your carefully cultivated water. So all of you are in an island, and you have to decide how are you going to divide these resources before the hurricane comes. And for the other participants, you're able to cheer your leaders on the chat. Feel free to do that as you're doing that. Now, I want to make sure, I think we only have 4 groups present. I'm trying to see who are we missing in the group. Let's see, before we go into that, the action.
If
So we
folks
have,
do not have their cameras on, I cannot spotlight them.
there
So,
we go.
okay, I'm gonna get Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Aunt Jennifer, wonderful.
And I
From
think
relationships.
it was Hara. Hara, I need you to turn. Thank you so much. All right, now we're ready.
Perfect. All right, the stage is set. So friends, you're gonna have about 7 minutes or so to just basically put yourself in a situation. The hurricane, Callista is coming, right? And Callista is 500 miles south of the island. You have to do what's best for your tribe, and you got these core values that are leading each of you. So how do you divide these resources equitably? Let's see a snapshot of what that might look like, okay? And action.
So what are everyone's thoughts? I want to hear from everybody in the group.
I'm sorry, I think I'm not clear on what exactly our task is. How do we know what resources we have? How many people are we organizing for? I'm really unclear on what it is that I'm supposed to do.
Is your value task, Hera?
Well, we could just go and play a game then. Play a game instead of worrying about it.
Yeah, well, I think it is a good idea to hear from everybody because the most important thing is that everybody survives, that all of us survive together.
Yeah, I think it's important that we not rush to action. It's good that we're all here together so we can tune in with ourselves and get quiet together and really think about what is the wise action that we need to take from the collective based on our collective discernment.
So what are our priorities then? How are we going to analyze and make this decision?
Having fun while we do this?
We can totally make it into a game, but let's figure out the things we need to do first. So let's start with our safety. How do we do this to be safe? And how do we know everyone feels safe? So we need to find a place to hide from the hurricane. I've never been in a hurricane, disclaimer, I don't know how to hide from one. A tornado, I'm good. Earthquake, okay. But how do you hide from a hurricane?
I wonder if we could each take a moment to just tune in with ourselves first and figure out what would we need to feel safe in this moment, and then we could collectively figure out what safety priorities we have as a group.
Or we could play hide and seek, and whoever wins, that's our hiding spot. Come on, it's so obvious if we need to hide.
Okay, I'll count to 10.
Hey, I'm just gonna jump in and say, but the storm's coming, we've got limited resources, we gotta get her done. So how do we move forward into action?
How about if we pair up with a partner and assign tasks that way, and that way we all have a safety buddy, a partner that we know will be attached to through the whole thing?
Yeah, I can get on board with that as long as we have some time to tune in with ourselves before we move into.
we can tune in with our partners too.
I'm good with that as long as we can get going and get action, like just get on it, hop to it.
All right, I'm liking this idea, but I want to get a little bit more serious. So, I mean, like the food and water. What are we going to do about our food and water?
Well, I heard Hara first bring up safety, and now I hear you, Serious Judy, bringing up food and water. So maybe we could each take a moment to figure out what we need in terms of food and water and safety, and then buddy up with our partners and start to put some ideas to paper and make a plan.
Yeah, and make sure that our partner has what they need.
I'm going to pause the scene for a moment, and I'm going to ask, so stay on camera, but I'm going to ask the people who are not in the spotlight, what are you noticing about the interaction?
Whatever we had discussed in our breakout rooms, they are using those prompts, basically, those signals to, actually move and create a story ahead.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We're not getting anywhere. The hurricane's still coming and everybody's still talking.
Okay. I see brainstorming. Serious William, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a competition between dealing with the reality of the immediate threat and the touchy-feely stuff, which I think a lot of us have. And I did just say to my leader that, if people need safety, once you've got a good plan, they'll feel safe. You don't have to worry about, it's like get the practical piece in place and then they will feel safe.
Okay. One more comment before we move on to the next scene. Anybody else? Anything you're observing?
I thought it was interesting how as relationship culture was well aligned with Rachel as inner presence.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Definitely. There's some resonance between different groups here. So we're going to do an experiment because, again, the thing about performance and improv is that we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to emerge, right? But I'm going to share my screen briefly. And leaders, I'm going to give you a slightly new direction. You're still the leader of your tribe. You're still, in the particular value you have. But this time, I want you to perform as if you're a group of aliens who believe that taking care of the other is your highest value. So let's have you perform. So Serious Judy, you're still Serious Judy, but you're going to perform as an alien that has a slightly different value. So let's see how this performance direction impacts, if at all, how you engage with each other. Not knowing if it's going to work or do anything different, but let's just see what happens. I'm going to give you again a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes for you to kind of play with this new perspective and let it impact who you're performing as. All right? Any questions? Okay.
I am. So the prompt was on your slide was make sure that we're taking care of each other.
That's your highest value. So you're aliens whose highest value is taking care of each other.
Oh, okay. Well, that aligns with the relationship group very nicely.
So, and it may or may not, depending on your tribe, right? But let's see what happens. So let's kind of take it from the top. We're going to do a take 2 in this scene. You're still on the island. You're still part of your tribe, but you're going to now be performing as aliens, kind of coming into the space and anticipating some danger, right? Well, let's see what happens. Action.
Is everybody okay right now?
Yeah, I'm good. Let's check in with everybody and see how they're doing and before we just jump in, just to make sure we're all okay and we're all on the same page.
I'm feeling a little nervous, anxious, and scared that the hurricane is coming. That's how I'm feeling right now.
Rachel, I'm having some serious concerns that we are not prepared.
I think perhaps as the liaison to Earthlings, I would really like for you all to notice that we have a vessel, and we have seen from our satellite that there is a detrimental weather event happening on your island. We would like you to find safety in harbor in our ship. We will release you after the danger has passed. Is anybody willing to join us? We come in peace. We would like to help you. We have a limited amount of time, approximately 20 minutes. You're welcome to bring any belongings you have with you. Step on up.
Can we bring all the people we?
Yes, we have room for everybody.
Oh,
If
perfect.
anybody needs facility to enter our ship, we're happy to help. If you are in any way needing accessible resources, we have them. We have translators. If you don't speak the language that I'm speaking to you now, if you can't understand me, come on up. We have water, H2O.
H2O, this is a seriously good offer. You guys, we should all take this offer. I want all of us to be safe. This is so important. We should go in the ship.
Oh, we are ready. I assume you have games.
We have so many games. We'll have to teach you how to play them, however.
Yeah.
You may not be familiar with them.
Yeah, let's just go
I'm
for
ready.
it.
We do have bananagrams. So if you know bananagrams, this we have.
This option feels warm to me. My intuition says that it's a good idea.
We've connected to your satellite, so you have internet access and satellite phone, so you can contact your loved ones if they are not on the island with you.
This may sound too good to be true, but I'm in.
Anybody feeling
Our
any
groups,
hesitation?
we're jumping in.
And scene. All right. Thank you, actors and leaders, for performing as the wonderful leaders that you did in this activity. And now what I want us to do is to take a moment to let me remove all spotlights, bring us back here for a moment. And I want us to just, this is like a teaser activity to hopefully see what, if anything, this kind of reflection inspire, right? And before we go and break you now into groups of 3, and hopefully the list of these can be random groups, right? We can kind of mix them up again. I want us to de-roll. I want us to come back to the human people that we are in our real lives, right? So for that, I'm just going to ask us to just maybe all make like a heart-shaped figure with our hands to kind of come back as a human tribe here, that all of us are here. Just kind of make a symbol that we're now here as humans, as who we are, and we're now, so you let go of the tribe that you created briefly. We created the culture, we let it go very quickly. And now we're going to basically send you to a group of 3 new people. And we want you to think about these following questions that Melissa's going to put in the chat for you. Essentially, we want you to debrief the experience. And we want you to think about, what am I becoming more aware of now? What, if anything, surprised me? And how might this awareness inform my work going forward? The thing about these activities is that sometimes they may be a dud. Maybe it's like, hey, nothing new came up, right? But the invitation is to be curious. Like, what did I notice? What resistance did I encounter? What excited me? What shifts in energy? They may be subtle. And we want you to just spend some time thinking about these subtle shifts that could have happened in just seeing that from the activity, from like, creating a tribe, to seeing the leaders take action and try to communicate, to then doing the performance, right? And when we come back, we're going to get a chance to then process and really kind of talk about any questions, any insights, and that's gonna then, we're gonna bring it to an end after that. So it'll be about 7 minutes in groups of 3 or 4 that ideally, hopefully have not already been part of the tribe, and we'll get a chance to process as a group. Any questions? Okay, let's see what happens. Welcome back, Mohammed.
Hi, how are you, Andres? I like so much, the game. I was not able to follow because I was on phone, but it comes from the same, let's say, we are coming from the same world because I'm a manager for a theater.
You're a theater manager. Wow.
Awesome.
So glad to have you here.
Love hearing that. Wonderful. Well, I want to hear more about that as well. But so basically, I was telling Melissa, like, this is actually where the rubber hits the road, right? Where we essentially, we kind of hear from your insights and connections between all these things that we just did. What, if anything, made sense? What insights, what connections did you make? And really want to hear about, what are you becoming more aware of based on what you saw? What surprised you, if anything? And how might this awareness inform your work going forward? We'd love to kind of hear from different people in the different groups. We have about 15 minutes for that before we close. Who would like to share?
Oh, I'll go. I was sharing with my group that watching that exercise just made me realize how transparent my agenda might be to others, and how limiting it might be in terms of being able to relate to others, and that going forward, I might be more aware of that and be less driven by my prioritized agenda.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think this is one of the things that, again, even in like a 10-minute role play situation, like these kind of the insights that can happen just by seeing that. And then I think one of the values of performance, again, is that we can kind of take on different roles for a moment and learn, like, okay, what do I like? What don't I like? What adjustments can I make in my script? Because again, when it comes to engaging others, which we need to do for collective wellness, right? We need to analyze, like, how am I engaging others with my script? Am I being too transparent? And is that somehow what's the impact that's having in my ability to engage with others and strategize for something bigger, perhaps? What else? Other reflections and insights from people?
We talked a little bit about the value of getting a new role and getting a new identity and being able to assume a new persona. And Andre, I think about what you said earlier about those unconscious, those things that we hold that we don't even maybe formally acknowledge come to the surface when you start being another personality. And I think that's kind of a joyful way to think about approaching complex problems or even difficult situations. Just assign funky roles and say, let's think about this in a whole different way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you get to decide for the things that emerge, what do we want to grab and what don't we need to grab, right? And the thing is, but having that playful perspective can really kind of soften up those strict rules that keep us stuck in thinking one particular way.
Yeah, and then maybe you don't get so married to your idea and you stay more in a innovative mindset where you can iterate and you don't, you know, that could be one of the games that follows, right?
Yeah. Now, this is easy to do when there are no stakes. This is a webinar. We're not playing a stakes. We're not really in the island, right? But if it's my job, if it's money, if it's like things like, I'm going to hang on to that script pretty well because I think these are the moments where, like, you know, can we catch ourselves when we're hanging on to our role for a particular reason and identify what's keeping me here and how can I perhaps shift a little bit, right? Because again, but it's in the moment when we feel that stuckness, that pressure to hang on to something, I think that's where this awareness can be quite helpful. Let's hear from William. Serious William, what are your thoughts? What were some of the reflections?
Yeah, so I was in the serious group, and I'm serious by nature. My dad kind of raised me to be serious, right? And so it was really interesting because the other two people in the group, I perceived them to be a little bit more playful, intuitive, right? And so I'm going, okay, I don't know if we're going to get done what we need to get done, right? But right, but and so they were like a kind of approaching serious in a little bit different way than I was, and yet I'm going, oh my God, they're so efficient, and they were getting us to where we needed to get so fast, and I'm just kind of stepping back and going, wow, I really kind of labeled them and limited the opportunity for their behind the scenes qualities to come out, right? So that was a big eye opener for me. And I think that having a task, you know, a little script to deal with really demonstrated that quickly, how we worked together, how effective we were, all of that, right? So you can talk a lot about what you value, but when you're actually working with somebody on something, it all comes out, how they show up. So yeah, that's just my reaction to all of it.
Thank you for that. And one thing I also want to just underscore, because I think it's, you know, you said your dad raised you to be serious. And I think, you know, like we are, if we're part of this society, our who we are as people gets influenced. You know, we all have scripts, you know, being a man, being a woman, being, you know, whatever gender you identify, like it begins to give you certain scripts in life. And then we assume that it, you know, being serious means to be ABC, right? And it limits what you said, which I love. I love the insight. It can limit our ability to see other people, to also be able to achieve a common purpose, but because they're not fitting our box, we limit that. So again, when we come back to the idea of collective wellness, perhaps people have some ideas that because our scripts we're not able to see, but we're not even engaging them because we've written them off because in our brain said they're different than us, right? Friend or foe. And I think that, again, the key here is, again, as we raise awareness of that, first of all, not to judge our initial reaction. You know, the Buddhists talked that the brain is like a monkey with 1,000 knives, right? Our mind is crazy. It's going to say a million different things. And as my therapist, and one of the biggest things I think we can all do is just be in therapy. I've been in therapy for 2 decades, highly recommended. This increase our awareness about ourselves and others. As my therapist says, you know, don't believe everything you think, don't believe everything you feel, right? Because our scripts give us meaning about what I should feel and what I should think, right? And the idea is to be able to go beyond that. And again, when you're performing, what's happening is you have new experiences that your script is like, oh, I can't compute. What does this mean? And then you challenge yourself to then kind of make sense of it. So I appreciate your reflections because I think it really kind of speaks to that, the interaction between our script as a person and then how it engages even in these small activities. Rachel, inner peace.
Yeah, our group was contemplation, and something that just came up in our small group debrief is both the value and the pitfall of just having one value or one stance that we were orienting from, and that can be detrimental when we're trying to, when complexity gets scary or diversity gets scary, and we have that sort of short circuiting that you were just describing, Andres, and then we latch onto one thing. You know, I have the one answer, or I've come up with we oversimplify things. We make things simplistic because it's hard. to navigate
Yep.
complexity. So we have the one thing. And then the value of having a North Star, like the value of having one value or one clear intention that helps us navigate that complexity in an elegant way. Like oftentimes the most elegant solution is the simplest solution. So just teasing out the distinction of like when we're oversimplifying and making complex things simplistic versus like sometimes there is value in the simple, elegant orientation towards having a North Star or a clear intention.
Yeah. And again, it's like in complexity, it's about both and, not either or, right? So it's like, and I think that's why sometimes in our lives, like when things like I was doing some research for the book that I just finished writing, which I will be sharing with you later on. And it said that the number one threat to humanity is uncertainty. Like that was like what they were saying, right? And there's so many things that are uncertain. And a big part of it is because, when things are uncertain, we then just grasp onto what we know. And like we kind of, our lizard brain goes to like fight or flight mode. And in those moments, we simplify, and there's a great book by Jennifer Garvey, The 5 Mind Traps. I forgot her last name, but it basically talks about beware of the simple narrative. Beware of like in the midst of complexity, when things are really crazy, beware that our lizard brain is going to gravitate towards whatever we think is going to give us certainty and stability. And Rachel, to your point, so nice. It can help us navigate the complexity, but we might be missing out a bunch of stuff. And I think our role as leaders, as facilitators, systems change people, right? It's like, how do we help groups contain and sustain these different modalities, different elements and values to see what emerges? But that requires so much self leadership and really supporting ourselves to be able to do the work. And again, all this work around performance is, again, that social emotional gym to really help us develop our capacity. What Viktor Frankl said, he's a Holocaust survivor that said that between the stimulus and the response, there's a space. And the space is my ability to choose. And then my ability to choose is my power, something like that. I'm kind of paraphrasing there. But the whole idea that in this moment between the stimulus and the response, we want to make choices. As Lou was talking about at the beginning, it's not about reacting, it's about making choices. And as we strengthen our ability to be in that space, we can make choices and we can make decisions that take into account a bigger, more collective perspective, which is what we need to be able to achieve collective well-being. We need that diversity of opinion and to contain that emotional fire to get us to the next level. What else? Other reflections? We have, I think, time for maybe 2 or 3 more before we transition out.
I think maybe just building off of what you just shared there, in our group, towards the end of our small group conversation, the last time we were talking, I was in the playfulness group, and we talked a little bit about that and the role of playfulness in an emergency type situation. And I think when you're not used to working from a certain lens, you take it really literally, and you haven't necessarily internalized it to know how it plays out under pressure, maybe. And so the need for practice, and because I was really stuck in this place of like, well, is there a place for playfulness in an emergency? Like, you need to get down to business. Like, but one of our group members had like shared some examples from like sci-fi and stuff that really made me think about, okay, so if that's a skill that you hone outside of an emergency situation, then you have this strategy or tool that you can come to more naturally, that there is a playfulness that, or, just that thinking outside the box, thinking differently, being more flexible, that kind of thing that you can bring to emergent situations. But it requires honing that skill in order to be able to use it efficiently, I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, these are things that, and actually, if you think about it, we as children have that skill set, naturally. Like, to have any kid alone in a space, they'll be able to play very quickly. They'll engage with that, right? And then we kind of get into the school system and education that kind of gets beaten out of us. And I think our job is to reintegrate that playfulness. Like, is it both and? How can we reintegrate the great skills that we learned through our education, logic, linear thinking, but bring back that ability to be playful? And again, it's like a muscle that's perhaps has atrophied a little bit. How do we kind of bring that back? I love that you talk about the idea of disasters. Actually, I have a friend, there's a group called the Applied Improv Network, AIN, and I met a friend of mine there, Dr. Mary Tiskowicz. I forgot her last name, I'm not pronouncing it right, but she has something called Heroic Improv, where she worked in the Philippines to train people that were responding to disasters through improv. Their ability to perform in the improv, actually, it was a skill set that allowed them to kind of be able to better adapt to the circumstances, because during a disaster, things can happen you don't plan for, right? So you have to be able to quickly improvise with your ensemble, because the whole thing about improv performance is also, how do we do this together, right? It can't just be about me and my ideas. I have to be able to quickly build with others to be able to do that. And again, that requires us being aware of our scripts and being able to let go of our scripts to kind of make it about the ensemble and not about me, right? But yes, it is a skill. It is something that can be practiced. And the question is, where do we practice this skill? How do we make space for it in our day-to-day or in our week-to-week? It's not something that, and this was just like a taste, like there's so much here to do. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't make space for that playfulness.
I think, I think that protest movements show that really beautifully. Like there are obviously ones that are very serious, but then like you look at Extinction Rebellion in England, and so many of their protests are full of joy and play. They were protesting at the the mayor of London's, the new prime minister's house, because he has like some fancy heated pool, and they showed up in flippers and masks and in their swimsuits, and we're like, oh, so you're going to let us play in your pool because you've closed all the public pools, right? And that is a form, right? It's play, but it's very serious protest too about really big issues.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for bringing that example. Maybe one more comment before we begin to transition out. Anybody else? Any reflections about any insights or anything that came up for you in your reflections? Thank you. Well, if there are no more comments, I'm going to then share my screen again. And basically, as we're closing out, I want to just try to bring together like some of the things that I feel an invitation from this improv activity that we did in the performance to help us navigate diversity so we can try to achieve this collective well-being. And I think the invitation starts with see yourself as an improvised actor making choices, right? Just that perspective gives you flexibility of role, right? Because especially when things get very heated or very tense and you are really stuck on something, can you try to remind yourself that you are making a choice in this matter, right? That you're choosing this response to that. And then I think the other invitation is to choose curiosity, right? Oh, I wonder why I'm hanging on to this so dearly. Why is it so important to me? I think curiosity is something that can really help us engage the other and our interaction with them. To also see everything as an offer, especially when the offer that is made to you is something that it's not what you hope for. It's like, in some ways, the example you just gave, frolic and sea otter, let's see, Angela, but the offer was the prime minister shut down the pools. That was an offer. And this group said yes and to that. Let's build on that. And now let's create a whole thing around going to your pool around that. And I think having that mindset will basically allow us to make lemonade out of limes any day, right? No matter what the world throws at us, no matter what our clients or collaborators, whatever, we'll be able to kind of play with that and and say yes and to that. And the last thing is to also just be very attentive to your emotions. I tend to think of our emotions as kind of this beam detector, when you're I know unless you're doing some construction work, right? We have the beam detector to see where are the beams in the house, right? Our emotions are kind of letting us know where are these things that are happening to us. And again, the challenge of our emotions is that it provides so much rich data, but the data is so mixed up and convoluted between like my own things and my own hang-up and neuroses with what's out there in the system. And I think the more aware we become around that, the more we can use that data then to be able to offer it to the group to create something with that, right? So these are just kind of some bullets that I wanted to kind of leave you with, some concrete kind of invitations from the world of improv. But I guess if you think about all this, we've been talking about today, how to be able to kind of, again, engage the other, navigate diversity, to be able to create cultivated well-being. It really is about leadership, right? And you need to be able to lead yourself before you can lead others, before you can lead teams, organizations, and systems. And you have to do that you have to start there. And I guess I want to leave you with basically two things. One is a quick plug for the book that I just wrote with ChatGPT in the month of April. I'm launching it on June 8th. If you use the QR code and the link we'll put in the chat, you can download the free excerpt. And I'm trying to make the case as a facilitator, but also somebody who has seen this work, is the fact that I believe that facilitation is actually an archetype for leadership in the 21st century. And so I'm trying to make the case for that. And I believe that actually that can be done with a lot of joy and playfulness, right? So that's something in the book that I'm sharing that's free to download, and feel free to take a look and let me know what you think. And then lastly, also I want to just thank all of you. All the proceeds from this particular workshop are going to go to the Global Play Brigade. So GPB is a group that got started with the pandemic. It was a brainchild of some of the people in the East Side Institute as well, kind of a spin-off. And the idea was, how can we play across borders, to really reactivate adults' imagination and creativity. I think it's just a worthwhile element. I'm a member of the group. I know the founders, the executive director, they're good friends of mine. And I think they're trying through their own ability and their own style to bring play. And I think the invitation is like, how can we be more playful, right? How can we bring more of that play in whatever style we're comfortable with in our space, in our lives? And so I just want to say again, thank you for that. So I'm going to pass it over to Melissa for some updates about CoCreative.
Yeah, not really updates so much as just I want to offer my appreciation and gratitude for those of you who joined us today for this live session, and also to Andres for bringing this playful, joyful, wayfaring experience to us. We often do our webinars a little bit different than other folks in the community, where we host them just as a big meeting where we can spend time together and learning and growing, and really grateful to you all for being here and creating this space with us. You know where you can find information about us, and I will make sure that we'll send out, when it's ready, a recording of this session so that you can have that to share with others. Also, all of the links that we've shared, I'll make sure that you get those, as well as the copy of the PowerPoint, if that is also valuable to you all. You can go to the next slide, if you don't mind, Andres. Thank you so much. Wanted to just also see if you wouldn't mind helping us spread the word about this special opportunity that we're hosting next month in July. As you can see, the time zone for this particular training are really focused on Eastern Europe and Africa. We're doing a brand new thing where we're offering this training opportunity to really nurture capacity wherever people need it. And so we're doing a sliding fee scale, and we're going to provide French translation. It's something that's new for us. And so if you could help spread the word among your networks, that would be really, really helpful for us. As we're thinking about how we can equip people to scale up their skills and their capacities. We know that in lots of places, people are doing really good work. I think that's it for me. We can, we'll send this out.
Awesome. And the last thing, I know as we're ending, I want to just do a quick chatterfall. There's an activity that you may know by different names, but essentially, I want all of you to go into the Zoom chat and write a sentence about your experience in today's webinar, but don't hit enter until I tell you to. So just put it in the chat, but do not hit enter until I tell you to. We're going to then do that together, and that's why it's called chatterfall. So we'll kind of see all the things come down together. But just a sentence, a few words about your experience today, takeaways, insights, whatever you want to write, but just as a way to document and kind of close us out in this mini ritual. Again, write it, but do not hit enter until I say to go. Okay. And what I'll do is when you're ready, give me a thumbs up, so that way I'll know you're ready. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Let's give people a few more seconds. Okay, And at the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, and hit enter. And just kind of can scroll and take a look for some of these joyful way to start the day, unexpected joy and fun. Teamwork makes the dream work. Letting go of the product and embracing the process. Well, my friends, thank you so much again for your time. Really appreciate all of you. Please stay in touch. And again, CoCreative, thank you for the opportunity to present here today.
Thank you, Andres, and thank you all. If you want to unmute and say goodbye in your language, adios. Nos vemos pronto.
Adios. Ciao.
Goodbye.
tengan buen
Thank
día.
you.
Hey,
Tengan buen día.
thank you,
Adiós.
Andres. Thank you.
Yeah. Great session.
Thank you,
Much
everybody.
appreciation.